Good morning. Welcome the members and staff and guests to the July meeting of DASNY. We're 7 in number, so we have a quorum, and we expect one more before the end of the meeting. We have a very short agenda today, and I'm going to ask that everybody cover the matters that need to be covered as thoroughly as you choose, but that you remember that today's watchword is brevity, if we can do that. There's several members who have to leave early, and I don't want for them to miss the meeting or any part of the meeting. We'll get right into it. The first order of business is the review and approval of the minutes. Have you all had a chance to read them? Are there any suggested revisions? Did we make any mistakes? Hearing nothing, may I have a motion to approve them? Thank you, Gerard. Is there a second? Paul, thank you. All in favor, please indicate with aye.
Aye.
Aye. The next order of business is the Finance Committee report. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Finance Committee met this morning. First up on the agenda was the adoption of the meeting minutes from the June 2017 meeting of the Finance Committee. Those meeting minutes were approved unanimously. Then we advanced to discuss one finance that's on today's agenda, which was the school district revenue bond financing program. After some discussion, the Finance Committee recommends that offering be adopted at today's board meeting. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gerard. Any questions for Gerard? Hearing none, we will move to the adoption of the financing documents. There are 2 matters to be considered. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Behind tab 3 is the Interagency Council of Developmental Disabilities Credit Summary Update with co-bond counsel Melissa Bennett of Barclay Damon and Gabriel Marouse of Marouse Law Group and Gerard Clauser presenting.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, DASNY Board, senior staff, and guests. The credit summary update provided to the members presents a pooled financing for the Interagency Council. Recent information includes the departure of one of the members, Services for the Underserved, Inc., from the pooled financing. Services for the Underserved, Inc. had expected to finance 3 projects, 2 PPA projects totaling $2.2 million, and one $4.7 million non-PPA project. As a result, the pooled financing will now include 6 members of the Interagency Council. The proposed bond issue will be for a term not to exceed 26 years and will be in an amount not to exceed $19 million, a reduction of $8 million from the $27 million requested at the resolution to proceed in April. The member institutions have received a PPA or prior property approval for all 9 projects. The UCP New York City Flushing Avenue project is a partial PPA approval. The non-PPA portion of the project will be funded with public funds as a result of significant program revenue for this project. The SECR filing was completed on July 17, and Moody's ratings were confirmed AA2 were confirmed July 18. This financing will be similar to the prior IAC transactions, with each borrower having its own individual loan obligation. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Gerard. Who will begin the presentation?
Good morning. Before you for consideration is a proposed series resolution authorizing up to $19 million Interagency Council Pooled Loan Program Revenue Bonds under the IAC Pooled Loan Program Revenue Bond Resolution adopted in 2010. That general resolution authorizes DASNY to issue multiple series of bonds to help the nonprofit members of IAC finance facilities serving people with developmental and other disabilities. DASNY loans the proceeds of each issue to 1 or more IAC members for their facilities, and DASNY enters into a separate loan agreement with each participant. Each series of IAC bond is separately secured by the payments to be made by the participants under their respective loan agreements. IAC members receive most of their funding through state agencies, and each member in its loan agreement grants DASNY a security interest in such public funds relating to the facility financed.
The proposed bonds will finance approximately 9 facilities for 6 IAC members, each of which is licensed by one or more state agencies, including in all cases the State Office for People with Developmental Disabilities. Proceeds of the bonds will also fund a debt service reserve fund and costs of issuance. The proposed bonds are currently contemplated to be issued as 2 subseries, one taxable and one tax exempt. The bonds will be special obligations of DASNY, payable solely from the revenues pledged to the bonds, which are primarily payments made under the applicable loan agreements. As Gabriel mentioned, these payments will be secured by a security interest in the public funds relating to each financed project. The bonds will also be secured by the Debt Service Reserve Fund, which is expected to be 1/2 of the maximum annual debt service.
As described in our letter, all the projects have or are expected to receive a prior property approval, PPA, from OPWDD. In all cases but one, the PPA evidences OPWDD's commitment to pay an amount sufficient to amortize the project's portion of the bonds, subject to state appropriation and operation of the project to state standards. These payments will constitute pledged revenues. The exception is United Cerebral Palsy of New York City's Flushing Avenue facility, which has a PPA that will provide payments in the amount of 1/3 of the debt service due on that facility's allocable portion. The remaining 2/3 will be covered by other operating revenues, primarily public funds. As additional security, DASNY will enter into intercept agreements so that upon an event of default by a participant, OPWDD will make the payments relating to the finance facilities to DASNY or bond trustee as directed by DASNY. Except for 2 leased properties, the participant's loan will also be secured by mortgages. For the leased facilities, the participants will assign their respective leasehold interest to DASNY as collateral.
As we have noted, the bonds will be separately secured from all other series by the loans to the participants. These loans are not cross-collateralized with or cross-defaulted to any other loans. If a participant defaults on a loan, the default will not constitute a default under the loans made to other participants, and only the defaulting participant's allocable portion of the bonds may be accelerated. If the amounts recovered through the security we've described are insufficient to pay in full such portion of the bonds, those bonds shall nevertheless be deemed paid and shall be canceled by the trustee. In such event, the default shall be deemed cured and the affected bondholders shall have no further rights under those bonds. As described in our letter, the series resolution delegates to various officers the power, among others, to set the terms of the 2017 A bonds and to establish funds and accounts to be maintained by the trustee. The series resolution also authorizes the preparation, execution, and delivery, as appropriate, of customary documents for a negotiated public offering of bonds. The bonds are expected to be sold on a negotiated basis to Municipal Capital Markets Group pursuant to a bond purchase agreement in customary form. Are there any questions?
Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the transaction? So moved. Thank you very much, Sandra. Is there a second? Thank you very much, John. Gardner. All in favor, please indicate with aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you all very much.
Behind tab 4 is the school district's refunding single approval credit summary with co-bond counsel Kevin Roach of Oric Harrington and Sutcliffe and Gabriel Marouse of the Marouse Law Group and David Ostrand presenting.
Gabriel, do you get double time?
So it seems.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
David.
Morning.
Good morning.
The single approval credit summary and staff report provided to the members presents 15 series of tax-exempt and/or taxable bonds in an amount not to exceed $500 million to be sold through multiple negotiated offerings on behalf of various New York State school districts. Proceeds from the issuance of these bonds will primarily be used to refund bonds issued by DASNY through the school district program, but may also be used to refinance the bond anticipation notes of these districts as well as to finance new money projects. You'll recall the most recent school district's authorization occurred back on March 8th of this year, when the board also adopted 15 new series resolutions authorizing up to $500 million. Since that time, DASNY has issued 5 series of bonds totaling $302.5 million to refinance bans and to finance new money projects for 40 school districts. The board might recall that participation for this year's June pool increased as a result of interest rates that were rising in relation to the statewide average interest rate, which typically drives borrowers through the DASNY pool. So following this new money issuance, there are now 10 series and 197.5 of remaining authorization under this approval. Since we priced the bonds back in May, the new money bonds, a decline in interest rates has created an additional refunding opportunity for bonds issued by DASNY between 2008 and 2011. 30-year AAA MMD has dropped 22 basis points, and 20-year was down 24 basis points since we priced those bonds back on May 10th. So as a result, there's a increased savings for a larger number of districts. So staff is requesting a not to exceed amount of $500 million to meet potential demand for school districts for a pooled refunding. While a conservative analysis shows a refunding of $191 million of bonds for 39 school districts, the actual par amount could be larger or smaller depending on variables such as interest rates and school district participation. If the current market held and we had participation from all districts, that pool could approach around $300 million. The security features described in the staff report are exactly the same as previous school district approvals and include semi-annual payments made pursuant to a financing agreement backed by the full faith and credit general obligation bonds of the districts, statutory intercept through the state comptroller of any state aid due to the districts, and bond insurance if available and economically advantageous.
Thank you, David. Gabriel or Kevin? Good morning again. There is before you for consideration the adoption of multiple series resolutions authorizing the issuance of fixed rate school district revenue bond financing program revenue bonds in the aggregate amount not to exceed $500 million pursuant to the master resolution adopted on May 29, 2002 as amended. The master resolution authorizes the issuance of school district revenue bonds to finance and refinance projects for school districts and to refund bonds issued pursuant to the master resolution. The master resolution constitutes the basic agreement between DASNY and the bond holders the holders of the bonds issued under it. The master resolution provides for the issuance from time to time of multiple series of school district revenue bonds in an unlimited principal amount. Each series of school district revenue bonds issued under the master resolution is to be secured separately from all other series. In March of this year, this board adopted 15 series resolutions authorizing the issuance of school district revenue bonds in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $500 million. My colleague will now go over the specifics of this series resolution.
Thank you. At the March meeting, the board adopted the series resolutions numbered 72 through 86, authorizing the issuance of $500 million in school district revenue bonds. Since then, bonds were issued under the 72 to 76 resolutions in the principal amount of $302.5 million, leaving $197.5 of remaining authorization. In order to provide for the potential refunding of bonds previously issued under the program, staff is requesting that the board rescind the authorization remaining under the 77 through 86 resolutions and authorize the issuance of up to an additional 15 series of bonds in a principal amount not to exceed $500 million as and when needed to satisfy the needs of the various school districts eligible to participate in the program. Accordingly, you have before you for consideration the rescission of the Series 77 through 86 resolutions and the adoption of 15 new series resolutions numbered 77 through 91, authorizing an amount not to exceed $500 million. It is anticipated that the proceeds of the 77 through 91 bonds will be used to refund bonds previously issued under the master resolution. While not currently anticipated, the bonds may also be used to refinance bond anticipation notes issued by various school districts to finance projects or to finance projects of school districts for which debt has not yet been issued. The new 77 through 91 resolutions delegate to various officers the power, among others, to determine the terms and details of the bonds subject to customary limitations, including the number and series of bonds and the principal amount of each series, the purchase prices of the bonds, provided that the bonds are not sold at a price that is less than 90% of the principal amount thereof, the date, maturity, and principal amount of each maturity, the amount and date of each sinking fund installment, and which bonds are serial or term bonds, provided that no bonds may mature later than 31 years from the date of issuance. The interest rate or rates, provided that the true interest cost of the bonds not exceed 7.5% per annum. The redemption dates and prices, provided that the redemption price of the bonds not exceed 103%. The school districts with which DASNY will enter into the financing agreement for each series, whether to obtain a credit facility with respect to any of the bonds, and the series maturities and principal amounts of any bonds to be refunded. As has been the practice in the past, although the resolution does not require the bonds be supported by credit enhancement, municipal bond insurance historically has been cost-effective with respect to certain series, and insurance may, but not need be, utilized with respect to bonds issued under the 77 through 91 resolutions. The new resolutions also authorize various officers of DASNY to prepare and distribute a POS and OS, execute one or more bond purchase agreements, execute financing agreements between each of the school districts and DASNY, execute continuing disclosure agreements, and execute all other documents and do all things necessary or available in connection with the sale of the bonds. All documents will be substantially the same as those documents distributed or executed in connection with previously issued bonds, and the bonds will be sold in negotiated sales.
As with prior series of school district bonds issued to finance or refinance projects for school districts, each school district will enter into a financing agreement with DASNY with the approval of the Commissioner of Education. The projects to be financed or refinanced with the proceeds of the school district's revenue bonds will be identified in each financing agreement. Prior to the issuance of the school district bonds, the financing agreements will have been approved by the Commissioner of Education. In addition, each school district will issue bonds to DASNY backed by the full faith and credit pledge of the applicable school district, following voter approval pursuant to the local finance law. Under the financing agreements and the school district bonds issued to DASNY, the school districts are obligated to make loan repayments to DASNY, which will be sufficient to cover principal and interest on the Series 77 to 91 bonds when due, regardless of whether the school districts receive state aid payments. Neither the Series 77 to 91 bonds nor the school district's obligation under the financing agreements are secured by a lien on any facilities of the school districts or any other property, and may not be accelerated as a remedy for defaults. The school district's obligation to make the loan repayments due under the financing agreements and other amounts due to DASNY under the financing agreements will, however, be supported by the statutory intercept mechanism of the program. In addition, the school district bonds will be backed by the full faith and credit pledge of the school districts, which requires the school districts to levy taxes in amounts sufficient to enable the school districts to pay the school district bonds securing their loan obligation. We'll now welcome your questions.
Questions? Yes, Ted.
Probably for David, or really for anyone, but since we don't currently anticipate new financing projects or refinancing of the bonds, is it correct to say that we're doing this because of the commissioner's reset and to realign the debt service obligations with that amortization?
Yeah, the purpose of this authorization is really to accommodate a refunding pool. There's every indication that the interest rate will be reset by the commissioner, so I think even if it wasn't, there would still be the refunding opportunity for the school districts to accommodate the districts for savings. But yes, I mean, that is really what's driving the refunding.
Is the savings substantial?
It is, yeah, it is. I mean, it ranges, it's a wide range by district, but net present value savings, I'd say range from about 3 to 6% per district. That's there's 60 potential districts, so it's really all over the map.
So my next question was going to be, but I think you may have answered, it was going to be why we would wait until after the commissioner takes action. But I think you're saying to take advantage of the savings.
It's really to take advantage of the current market. I mean, I don't think anyone knows where rates will be when the reset occurs, so I think the opportunity is there to obtain substantial savings. So I think that that's there's good motivation for the districts right now to do the refunding.
Therefore, worth doing even if the commissioner does not do the reset.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Are there other questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, just one housekeeping note.
Yes.
And that's just that the staff report notes that the COVID managers that are here are specific to the 2017 refunding.
Yes.
And that is the case for the Co-Bond Council as well, even though that's not noticed as such.
Thank you, Portia.
Thank you.
So moved.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Is there a second? Thank you very much, Merrill. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all very much. And Kevin, thank you for joining us today. I gather you're standing in for Eileen.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
All right. The next agenda item is the Corporate Governance Committee report. Chairman Johnson.
The Governance Committee met this morning, and first order of business was to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. Done. We then had a discussion, an executive session, proposed salary adjustments for a number of employees at the authority. I think in summary, we had a comprehensive conversation in the executive session, and when we came out of session, we concluded that we would advance the resolution to the board. This, I think, needs to end the challenges of the late part of the first decade of this century, and compensation for people who struggled for a decade now to get caught up. So I think we're getting to the end. We're not where we need to be.
It's a good start.
It's a good start. People who started, we haven't started. So that.
Thank you.
I move the resolution which was distributed at your place.
Does everybody have a copy of that resolution? Are there any questions from board members for Chairman Johnson or Mike Corrigan or anybody else here today? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the resolution? Beryl, thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Charlie. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. The next agenda item, management reports, beginning with that of the President.
Thank you. We are pleased to present our annual report. This is perhaps the third annual report that I've had the pleasure of working on, where the broad leadership team at DASNY, and the second that I've worked with Freeman and his team on. And I think what we attempted to do last year was really begin the process of forging a new path in terms of highlighting our impacts across the state, our partnerships with communities, our partnerships with higher education institutions, as well as healthcare institutions, state and local governments across the entire footprint. And we had a tremendous amount of success in terms of receiving that. The success was so well received that we had a large number of our partners who we worked with last year call us and highlight that there were a number of remarkable stories that they wanted to share with us that we were part of. And so we've made a clean break with the past and really focused on some very important themes. Innovative communities, where we begin to highlight the impact of the work that we did with NYU in particular, and that really is the lead story. And on the cover here is really the largest transaction that has ever taken place at DASNY, and that's 370 J Street in Brooklyn. That is a monumental project that is transformational. I had the benefit with Portia and Freeman Friday to do a walkthrough where the NYU team, as well as the president of NYU, they're tickled in terms of the work that we have done with them, feel very strongly about the support that we have provided the institution. This is a very important economic development. This is a very important intellectual project. This is a very important incubator, technology incubator in Brooklyn and Lower Manhattan. And again, it dovetails with the second story, or really the third story in here, which is the Columbia University Mind Center that we also finance in northern Manhattan, as well as Manhattanville. So that is just incredible. We've got educated communities where we talk about our 50-year partnership with CUNY. It's a wonderful story that we're very excited about. We've shared with CUNY. And of course, healthy communities where we talk about Orange Healthcare and the impact that that has had. And then we also talk about the opioid crisis and how we have been very instrumental and with the Department of Health in combating those challenges. And then resilient communities. Resilient communities in one particular area is energy efficiency. And the work that we have done with CUNY and the work that we continue to set forth. So it's a complete change in format, a lot of very important stories, a lot of value added. It is a combination of a very broad commitment across all of DASNY, collaboration. And so we're very pleased, and we'll begin to send these out. Other section, end of session legislation, let me just highlight a couple of things. The legislative session that concluded in June included an expansion of the libraries that DASNY can provide services to, and a new program to buy American products on certain state construction projects. We are also excited to welcome Port Jefferson Free Library on Long Island to the family of libraries across the state that can receive services from DASNY. DASNY is supporting libraries as they grow into community centers for the 21st century to become platforms for economic empowerment where residents can learn new skills and conduct a job search, as one example. More importantly, they provide safe places for study and room for neighborhood meetings and are models for resource sharing. By supporting libraries' capital needs, DASNY is helping New York communities grow, attract, and retain talent. This is a very important economic development project in many communities. Another point, lawmakers also approved Governor Cuomo's Buy American legislation. It requires DASNY, the Department of Transportation, the Thruway Authority, the Bridge Authority, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, the Office of General Services, and the SUNY Construction Fund to include in contracts a provision requiring the use of American-made structural iron and structural steel for all surface, road, and bridge projects. The measure requires that the entire manufacturing process for these items occur in the United States with the possibility of exemptions in certain cases. It is designed to support the continued growth of manufacturing to help preserve and create jobs. As it relates to public finance and portfolio monitoring, DASNY continues to be among the nation's leading public finance institutions. On July 3rd, DASNY was recognized by Reuters as the #2 issuer of tax-exempt bonds in the nation for the first half of 2017. According to the Thomson Reuters data, California sold a total of $4.6 billion in municipal bonds with 5 issuances, followed by DASNY with $3.6 billion as of this writing. With that, I will turn it over to Portia.
Thank you, Charlie.
Unless you have questions, any questions?
Question on the Buy American. Is there a significant cost to that to us?
Well, you know how many roads and bridges we do.
Increased cost because of where we're going to be buying the steel.
The legislation contains provisions authorizing the agencies and authorities that this impacts to evaluate costs and make an exception if the cost is determined to be unreasonable. And also authorizes all of the impacted agencies and authorities to adopt regulations for further defining the program. So there is a further development phase that's anticipated from this legislation.
So there is a reasonable judgment decision that the agencies can make.
That is correct. For state agencies, it's done by the commissioner, and for here, it's the governing body of the authority.
Sandra, we already have in our contracts today a Buy American clause for structural steel. So there's little impact to DASNY projects. It's already in there.
Thank you, Steve.
Good to know. I have another question for Gerard. Do you know now what about the August meeting? Are we anticipating that we are likely to have that?
We're not having
We had to save the date on it.
Right.
I can quit saving it.
You can quit saving.
Thank you.
You can. I'll give you the eraser.
Doing it right now.
It's okay.
Might not to be that upset about.
Believe me,
Double booked
there-
today already.
there are some things that we hear very clearly.
Mr. President, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So,
No, I mean, if there were a need, it's
No,
okay.
no,
Just
no.
wanted to know.
Where possible, we telegraph that, let's try to move as much to July as possible. We've tried to do that for the last 3 years, and, it's worked this year, so.
Well, let's not assume that it's worked. Because something could come up, and it might be important for us to satisfy the particular needs of a particular client, especially our large ones. So I'd like to come back in September, but if we have to come back in August, we will come back in August.
Mr. Chair, since you said it that way,
You're very kind.
I was asked a question, I responded to it, and the question from a binary perspective is we will not have a meeting in August. Okay, thus far.
All right. That's exactly right. Portia, please.
Thank you. Behind tab 8 of the Standard Public Finance Reports, since my last written report, we priced the Jewish Theological Seminary transaction as well as the PIT refunding. I think we were actually in the market at the last board meeting in the PIT refunding. And we were just in the market yesterday with the sales tax competitive transaction. We took the bids yesterday. We received, as you'll recall, on the large tax exempt tranche, or tax exempt series, we tranche it into 3 pieces. And as a result, there were 3 separate winners on the tax exempt tranche, or the tax exempt series, 3 tranches, and there was 1 winner on the taxable. RBC won the first tax exempt tranche, Jeffries won the second, Bank of America Merrill won the third, and Citi won the taxable piece. On the tax exempt series, we had 9 bidders, and on the taxable series, we had 12 bidders. The one thing I'll say, and we've talked about this in the past, the process that we go through when we actually take that really large series, which is generally over $1 billion, and we chunk it out into 3 pieces, to make them smaller in size, really has worked to our advantage as we've priced the bonds. It's a smaller size, so it's less risk for the underwriters as they're looking at their bids. And then in addition to that, because we take the bids basically every half hour, you can see who's won the first bid, and the firms are basically sharpening their pencils as the morning progresses. So we really did see very, very aggressive pricing on those bids. It was really a very, very good result. Just as to a brief market update, the muni market itself was really very, very, very strong yesterday as we took the bids. I think the news coming out of Washington on a number of fronts helped to add to that risk-off tone. The market was, in terms of supply, pretty sizable this week, $8 billion, although we represented $1.4 billion of that. There have been outflows from the bond funds for 2 weeks in a row now. And MMD has increased 8 basis points for the 30-year MMD and 4 basis points for the 10-year. I'm sorry, 8 basis points for the 10-year MMD and 30 basis points. Let me do this again. 8 basis points for the 10-year MMD, 4 basis points for the 30-year MMD since the last board meeting. I'm really having a hard time today.
Well, that's not your fault. It's because typically it's not so volatile, but it really is that volatile that if this was 2 days ago, it would have been very different numbers, which is unusual for fixed income.
You're very kind, Beryl. But I will say, it was an interesting dynamic because when we were pricing the PIT transaction, the PIT refunding, as you'll recall, $1.7 billion, the market had been really stable for the 2 weeks before we priced that transaction, and then it weakened right before the transaction that Monday, further weakened on Tuesday. So it's an interesting dynamic. Still a very, very good pricing. And this time going into the competitive bid, the market was just cooperating with us nicely, sort of the day before and then the day of. So be lucky and smart. There's also a quarterly financial advisor update in my report. So thank you very much. That concludes my portion.
Questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to go into executive session to discuss the financial and credit histories of retail corporations? Thank you, Sandra. Is there a second? Second. Charlie, thank you. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. The motion carries unanimously. We are in executive session. The minutes will reflect that we just left the executive session, during which no decisions were made. However, of course, will be returned to the public session. Mr. President.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to announce that New York State Office of Mental Health's Bronx Behavioral Health Campus has been awarded LEED Silver status by the U.S. Green Building Council. It brings us to 40 LEED certified construction projects. We are proud to have partnered with the Office of Mental Health in driving construction in New York toward a more resilient and sustainable future. The campus's efficient construction will provide an estimated 21% energy savings, which equates to $300,000 in annual savings. Steve Coral will now provide you with an update on the construction division's work.
Thank you. Behind tab 9 are the 3 construction division reports. Start with the construction projects report. On the cover are photos of the New York State DEC White Pond Dam Spillway Replacement Project. This was a project that came to us through the New York Works program. The budget was $1.1 million. The scope was to replace the existing spillway. It was a 1968 construction, so it was in need of replacement. Design started in June of 2013 and completed in May of 2015. Dewberry were the engineers of record. Construction started in April of 16 and completed in May of 17, and Coil Industries was the GC. This project is located in Putnam County, just south of I-84 and just east of the Taconic Parkway on White Pond. A couple of construction challenges that were encountered along the way. There was an existing 47-foot by 11-foot by 3-foot thick mat foundation underneath the existing spillway, which was an unforeseen condition. We had as-built documents that showed a 1-foot thick slab that was to be removed. We ended up keeping the 3-foot thick mat in place and building the new spillway upon that. Overall, this is one of 33 DEC projects out of the New York Works program with a total value of approximately $60 million. On page 2, there's a number of new projects that have come to DASNY I wanted to highlight. We're doing a installation of an emergency generator at Hustos Community College, along with some additional associated mechanical and electrical work. The project budget is $5.9 million. Additional work out of the DEC New York Works program. The Hudson Valley Flood Control Project is a pump house rehabilitation project valued at $6.2 million. At SUNY Oneonta, we're doing a rehabilitation of McDuff Hall, $16.1 million. At SUNY Albany, we continue with our rehabilitation of their existing residence halls. This is Dutch Quad, 200-bed residence hall, as well as rehabilitation of a wellness center, valued at $26.5 million. And downtown Albany, SUNY's Alumni Quad, we're demoing Waterbury Commons and rebuilding a new Commons building, as well as dining hall and res hall, today valued at $39.5 million. On page 8, construction expenditures. Prior year through May, we were at $95 million. This year, we're at $132 million. That's an increase of $37 million through May. And just quickly, project and program updates. The SUNY work, we're 2/3 of the way through by calendar. 34 summer projects are valued at $30 million, 7 capital projects valued at $80 million. We continue with about 1 month left in the construction period. There are challenges at some of the capital projects, New Paltz, Oswego, and Plattsburgh, but we're working through them and are confident we'll have them open on time. And I'll report the results at the next board meeting. Javits and Moynihan. As the permitting agency for Javits, we're working now on design reviews for the foundation work associated with the convention center expansion. And on the Moynihan side, we are continuing to oversee the early train hall work, including demo, reinforcement of structural steel trusses, and asbestos abatement. I'm actually going to be on site with our code compliance manager, Rick Terrio, this afternoon, performing a walkthrough of the project. NYCHA, we continue work on the security projects and the appliance purchase and installation program. In addition, the last bit of work there, the quality of life projects, are moving forward with pricing of the design work now ongoing by our jock contractors. This is really the final step before obtaining approval from the project stakeholders and moving those projects into construction. Those are mostly exterior projects we've talked about in the past, basketball courts, playgrounds, etc. And the Court Officers Training Academy, the project completion date has now slipped into August, as reported by the project's general contractor. Work does continue in all 3 buildings, as well as pre-TAO activities associated with occupying the project. And just lastly, we were out in Buffalo last week at the SUNY Physical Plant Association Summer Conference. We presented to them and all the SUNY schools. We did highlight our Brockport Design Build project. I was able to make it over to that project, and it is moving along. That concludes my report. If there's any questions, I'll take them.
Steve, what happened to that Griffin Lab project, and where is that anyway? Where is Griffin?
I don't know. I'll check.
It's noted that it was dropped.
Yeah, you asked the last time about that? I thought I sent you an email on that. No?
Oh, that's the same one. Okay, then that's my.
Yeah, that was the response.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Other questions for Steve?
One thing I could just add, since we're on the topic of construction, coming out of the EY work that we were doing, we have, again, identified that we're looking for efficiencies, economies of scale as we do our small project. We have convened an internal work group inside the construction division to begin the process of facilitating that. So that's a very big step, and we're working with individuals across a number of areas. This is not designed to create another little unit that will be ongoing, but really to identify efficiencies that we can immediately impose on a number of projects. So,
What will be the work product of this group? Will they produce a report?
no, this is a working group in
Okay.
terms of focusing
Okay.
on the projects that we get, how we assess risk, time, efficiency. That's really what it is. This is not,
Yeah,
this is
no,
not a,
I got it.
this is integrated into a process
Okay.
in terms of, how we adapt to this new environment.
Good luck with it.
We'll need more than luck. We expect, no, I think this is good. I think there's a lot of buy-in from people. We have talked about this exhaustively internally. I think many of these ideas have come organically. They have come up through the construction division, so this is not something that EY comes to us with as an outside consultant and says, this is what you need to do. It's a very organic process, and with organic processes, there often is a lot more buy-in.
Okay.
So we're very excited by this. We'll keep you updated.
Thank you. Mike Cusack has advised that he doesn't have anything to add to the general counsel's report. Kim, do you have anything
No, I do not.
to add to your report?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then is there any other business to come before this board today? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to adjourn the meeting? John Gardner, thank you very much. Is there a second? Beryl, thank you. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. We are adjourned. Next